County Board is now in session. Welcome everyone to our virtual County Board Capital Improvement Plan public hearing. And tonight we're just taking testimony only on the manager's proposed 2021 to 2030, but it's really 2020 to 2021 capital improvement plan. It's going to be much truncated. And after tonight's public hearing, the county board will be holding a work session on July 9th, which people are welcome to watch at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And the board will take action on the CIP at our July 18 meeting. This is your time to comment on the CIP. So before we begin hearing testimony, we're going to hear a brief presentation from the manager and his staff, and then I'll go over a little bit speaking procedures to remind folks, and we'll be off and running. Mr. Schwartz, would you like to present?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This evening, Maria Meredith is going to walk through a short slide presentation, and then we'll send it back to you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everybody. Richard, you're going to pull up the deck. Thank you. Let's go on to the next slide. So it's certainly obvious the pandemic has impacted many things, including our CIP. So rather than a 10-year CIP this year, given the significant economic and financial impacts, and that we don't know how long this will last, the manager is proposing a 1-year CIP. We're taking a pause and focusing on funding only what is truly necessary. Many of our partners, especially in the transportation agencies and others, are in the same circumstances given the uncertainty of the future. So here we are, introducing a 1-year CIP, which the county board will take action on at the July meeting with a referendum that will be voted on in November. In the spring of 21, the county manager plans to come back to the county board with a medium step and a 4-year CIP, 4 to 6 year CIP. We want to highlight that we have a need for a bond referenda in November of 2021. This is an odd number year, and we haven't done this in decades, but we have specific needs, particularly around Metro, and then we hope to be back to our normal 10-year routine starting in 2023. Next slide, please. Thank you. We want to quickly highlight the county manager's principles as the CIP was developed. First was to continue projects that are underway, particularly where contracts have been signed or construction has begun. And you see on the screen here some of the examples of that: Fire Station 8, Jenny Dean Park, Lubber Run and Long Bridge. Next was to prioritize projects that address failing or end-of-life infrastructure. And some of these weren't in the last CIP, but became important, such as the Westgley Bridge or the trail bridges that were impacted by last July's storm. The third was funds to meet legal and regulatory obligations, and Metro is obviously the most obvious in this category. We have been and continue to adjust due to the pandemic, looking at how we use our space, and our needs for technology have changed. So we're going to have to make some adjustments that we didn't plan on previously. Excuse me. So this CIP allocates funds for facilities and technology associated with social distancing and the pandemic. The biggest item in this CIP is the focus on investments in stormwater infrastructure, consistent with the commitment the county manager and the county board has made after the July 8th, 2019 storm. There's over $50 million of bond referenda associated with stormwater, and there's been rigorous analysis, and this plan extends well beyond this year. Last is the manager's recommended implementing the body-worn camera program, with a plan to implement this program starting in January of 21. Purchasing cameras for police department, sheriff, and fire marshal, and includes hardware and storage, as well as upgrades to several courtrooms. It also funds replacement of the existing in-car camera system. Next slide. Thank you. Despite the short-term nature of this CIP and our modest new investments, it does reflect investment in all areas of the county's infrastructure and facilities, which support all of our services to the community and keeping things in good repair. Starting at the top of the circle, we have over 2 million square feet of facilities, from offices to community centers and libraries to 24/7 facilities such as the fire station, and you'll see investments in many of those areas. We have modest investments in parks and recreation, but certainly less than there was in prior years. The CIP includes funds for technology. Much of our workforce has gone mobile due to the pandemic, and there are funds for replacing end-of-life equipment. There are also funds for our neighborhood infrastructure, sewer and streets, funds for transportation, metro, as I mentioned previously, and our most significant focus on stormwater. I want to note that the stormwater bonds will be funded by the Stormwater Fund and its dedicated taxes, and stormwater bonds do not count against the county's 10% cap on debt service, which includes schools' debt service as a percent of general government expenditures. How we pay for the CIP. The CIP proposes investments of just over $275 million in 2021. And if you look at the gray area on the circle, you'll see that more than half of the CIP, the largest amount, is from previously approved funding. This is consistent with the county manager's principles of a focus on continuing and completing existing projects, particularly those under contract or under construction, and those where we have obligations to our funding partners and we need to make continued progress. Another point I want to highlight is that while most of the dollars are previously approved, many of our other sources are legally restricted in use. So for example, the transportation projects funded from the dedicated commercial industrial real estate tax can only be used for those transportation projects. Similarly, this is the same case with the sanitary district tax. And of course, our GEO bonds that are approved by the voters, you can't spend a parks bond on transportation or vice versa. So the highlight of our CIP is the 2020 Bond Referenda, which will appear before voters in November. So starting at the second to bottom line from the bottom, the total referenda for the county is about $92 million. The largest chunk of this is stormwater, and the first time it's been on the ballot. And we are recommending a substantial investment in stormwater at about $50 million. Next, there's about $30 million in Metro transportation, with the largest portion of that being our legal obligation to Metro. And next, there's a modest investment in Parks and Recreation at just under $4 million. Most of this is focused on needed repairs. And last, there's about $7.5 million focused on facility improvements. With the exception of stormwater, all of these categories are less than in prior years. And then last, the school board recently approved a $52.65 million referenda, which is under consideration by the county board. And so then this just takes you to the timeline that much of which Ms. Garvey mentioned at the beginning of this. We have a general government work session scheduled for July 9th. We have board adoption on July 18th. The deadline for us to submit the referenda for the November election is on August 14th. The voters considered our referenda on November 3rd, and then the county manager will be back to propose the next CIP in the spring. So that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Meredith. All right. Thank you all very much. So, Madam Clerk, before we get going to the speakers, Madam Clerk, how many speakers do we have tonight, just so people can plan a little bit and know how many people there are?
Madam Chair, we have 14 speakers so far.
14 speakers. All right. Thank you. And we'll take speakers, by the way, anybody who's listening up until 8 p.m. tonight, you can sign up to speak. So I'm going to just go over the speaking procedures, which some of you may know, but others may not. And I'm going to read them because I miss something if I don't. So our clerk is going to begin to call speakers, and she'll call them two at a time. And she'll begin with the pre-registered 2-minute speakers, and that will be followed by the pre-registered 3-minute speakers. And then we'll hear from anyone who's registered from the start of the meeting in that same order, first the 2-minute speakers and then the 3-minute speakers. And as I said, registration is available until 8 tonight. Please, those of you who are speaking tonight, we're all kind of together in the same room. So please keep your microphones muted, and I'll probably mute mine. And we will as well, but we'll be listening, of course, until you're called to speak. The moderator can mute you, but cannot unmute you. So if you're calling in by phone, you're going to need to press *6 to unmute yourself so we can hear you. And if you're using a computer, a browser, or an app, then you click the little microphone button on the toolbar to unmute yourself. If you are joining the meeting through Microsoft Teams app, which I think a number of you are, please turn off your camera until it's your turn to speak. And that's just because we have limited bandwidth and we start having trouble with sound and pictures if too many people are on video. And of course, please listen to the tone when your time has elapsed from speaking, that you're either your 3 or 2 minutes. After speaking, you may exit the call. You can, of course, continue to participate via the live stream that's online, or on cable channels Comcast 25 and 1085 and Verizon Fios 39 and 40. And if you are watching the meeting that way and then calling in, please make sure you mute that other way of listening, because otherwise there'll be a lot of feedback and there is a delay. So you're better off when you're speaking, just using the one method you've got. And I think for those wishing to submit written statements instead of speaking tonight, that's absolutely fine. And you can, of course, email us at any time at countyboard@arlingtonva.us. So I think that's all of the instructions. And Madam Clerk, would you please call our first two speakers?
Okay, our first speaker is Audrey Clement, followed by Benjamin Nichols.
Thank you. Ms. Clement.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, very good. Well, welcome members of the County Board and the County Manager. I'm Audrey Clement, the independent candidate for County Board. The proposed FY21 CIP shows a refreshing change of direction from funding overbuilt boondoggles to paying down basic infrastructure. The County Manager estimates that up to $200 million will be spent on stormwater facilities over the next 10 years. No one who witnessed the July 8, 2019 flood would doubt the wisdom of this critical investment. What I quarrel with is the cost. Much of the infrastructure to be constructed consists of low-impact development that's called LID, Best Management Practice, BMP facilities, such as pavers, cisterns, bioretention basins, swales, planters, green roofs, and rain gardens. According to Stormwater Magazine, the average capital cost of LID BMPs was around $6.40 per gallon in 2013, or about $7 today. According to the National Tree Benefit Calculator, the average 40-inch hardwood will intercept 19,000 gallons of stormwater runoff per year. Assume for the sake of argument that a LID facility needs to capture only 10% of that amount in one major rain event each year. Based on the following additional assumptions, which is 1,000 trees recently removed from Arlington public property, O&M costs, that's operation and maintenance costs at 10% of the capital cost, and system maintenance for 10 years. With these assumptions, a low ball estimate of the cost of the additional stormwater facilities needed to mitigate runoff due to tree removal is $13.3 million in capital costs and $13.3 million in operation and maintenance costs for 10 years of operations, or a total of $26.6 million. This may not sound like a lot in a 10-year CIP.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Clement. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Benjamin Nichols, followed by Darren Buck.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Nichols, and I live at 2400 Clarendon Boulevard. I'm calling to express my opposition to the stormwater improvement projects, especially for the Spout Run and Lumber Run watersheds. As we talk about forging a more equitable Arlington, making huge stormwater management investments in relatively low-density, affluent areas seems like a step in the wrong direction and seems especially perverse when we consider that single-family home redevelopment is the majority contributor to the growth in impermeable surface in the county. If we're going to make large investments in these areas on the idea that flooding is unacceptable anywhere in Arlington, we should make sure that the benefits of these investments accrue to a broader constituency than the privileged few that can afford to buy a single-family house in North Arlington. Perhaps a significant upzoning would be in order. Additionally, I'd like to express my support for restoring funding to the bike and pedestrian infrastructure improvements being cut in this plan. Investments in walking and biking are equity-oriented investments by nature. All people should be able to safely traverse the county, whether or not they can afford a 1,000-pound metal box to encase themselves in and the fossil fuels to power it. To that end, I'd encourage the restoration of funding for street safety improvements and for bike facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Darren Buck, followed by Julius Spain.
Thank you. Many of us white people are looking inward lately, thinking about systematic racism. Arlington's leaders have made a lot of value statements about how we need to work to dismantle racist systems, which brings to mind the old Joe Biden quote, "Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value." There's not much about improving racial outcomes in this budget memo, unfortunately, but there's a lot about revenue shortfalls. One investment that appears to worsen equity and saddle us with new debt and spending for decades at a time when we have no idea what our future looks like. The proposed stormwater program, $50 million in debt to start work on a $200 million program, almost exclusively for a white wealthy part of North Arlington. I have 5 main questions. 1, who exactly will this benefit? What's the income, race, ethnicity, tenancy, and value of properties within these flood-prone areas? How does that compare to the rest of the county that's going to be paying the bill? 2, remember Pike Transit? Ms. Garvey argued in 2013 it failed the cost-benefit test. What's the cost-benefit for this stormwater program? 3, Ms. Garvey also argued that BRT would improve cost-benefit, which is a promise unfulfilled for 7 years and counting. What are the alternatives to today's 9-figure program? 4, what does a no-build scenario look like? How many houses are at risk of being totaled? These houses are insurable under FEMA's subsidized National Flood Insurance Program. How much is that costing homeowners? And 5, why is this program the one that the county manager thinks we should use our finite debt capacity on? Why not more affordable housing or hold off until we can actually budget beyond a single year? Several board members have stated during COVID-19 we're all in this together. I believe that the folks in a $2 million Cherrydale house that benefit from the stormwater program are absolutely not in this with Arlingtonians who lined up for food giveaways in April. If the board doesn't ask critical questions about this stormwater program, we'll see what you really value. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Julius Spain, followed by Jillian Burgess.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Spain. You're a little faint, though.
Okay, hear me now. Madam Chair and members of the board, good afternoon. I'm calling on behalf of the NAACP in support of the body-worn camera program. I hope you agree that we want Arlington to lead by example with 21st century policing practices. As we begin implementation of the body-worn camera program, we also need to ensure the police department has policies in place so our public safety personnel and citizens are educated and well informed about the program. So again, we need policy and procedural reform as well. When we looked at the CIP, the NAACP, what we think is missing is a educational component for the community outreach. So just a few months ago, the board adopted the $1.3 billion fiscal year 2021 budget in April. And Madam Chair, you stated, you know, the budget we adopted today will likely need revision in the coming months. I think we're there. Even the county manager believes that this budget is going to need some changes. So we're going to need some FTEs and a few other things. I say all that because we're in this moment right now, and body-worn cameras is one thing. But the NAACP came to you about a month ago, nearly a month ago, and we also talked about Citizens Review Board. Nowhere in the CIP are we talking about implementation of this type of program, and we haven't heard from you. You know, we sent you a letter on the 16th of June. So we're actually standing by to hear what you have to say about Citizens Review Board. Again, we appreciate the board taking up the body-worn camera program, but there's more we need to do. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Spain.
Our next speaker is Jillian Burgess, followed by Reagan W.
Thank you. And if I could say, Ms. Clement, Audrey, Ms. Clement, are you able to turn off your camera, please? It'll just help our bandwidth.
There we go.
Thank you. Ms. Burgess.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the board and to the county staff for making this virtual session possible and for listening to the concerns of citizens. I would like to start with the good. I do appreciate that the proposed CIP includes funding to replace the trail bridge near the dog park. Though I do wonder why a facility that was destroyed in a storm requires waiting for a new CIP to get there. But more importantly, I think when you look at the overall structure of this CIP, of this proposal, we need to ask ourselves, what does this say about Arlington's priorities? It is true that we do have a stormwater plan, and it is needed to address some of the issues we've seen in our county. We also have a community energy plan. We have a master transportation plan. We have a public spaces master plan. We have multiple plans, and we have multiple priorities in our county. I am disappointed that this proposal elevates one particular section over the others, especially when you ask yourselves, as others have pointed out, the equity questions of who does this benefit, who is burdened, and who is not at the table. I think we have a lot of soul searching to do when we look at this proposal and think about things that are otherwise been cut. For example, in the original county budget, which was revised because of COVID, we had a very small investment of $300,000 proposed to take an inventory of our sidewalks to get an idea of the scope of the problem with regards to our sidewalks. We didn't have $300,000 to understand where our sidewalks need repair. So to turn around and say that we have now $50 million to address a stormwater program that primarily benefits the most privileged in our community makes me question, makes me think that we have more work to do in this area. Thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you, Ms. Burgess. Our next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Reagan W., followed by Rod Simmons.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Reagan Wampler, and I represent Children for America, leadership and public policy nonprofit. Overall, we're trying to create small business malls in Arlington to help students transform their innovations into reality. We need your guidance as to what property might best fit our project to promote local small business innovations. Maybe something close to Luber Run Community Center?
Hi, are you asking that question now?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Wampler, yeah. This isn't quite the time for that. We can certainly help you, but why don't you send it? If you would send us an email with your questions, we will get it to the correct staff and be able to help you. All right. So if you just send it to county, that would be great. We'd be happy to try to answer your question. This right now we're just trying to take comments on our capital improvement program, which is a little different. Okay. But we'd be happy to answer your question. Just send us an email. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Our next speaker is Rod Simmons, followed by Duke Banks. Mr. Simmons? Okay.
Mr. Simmons?
Okay. We will go on to Mr. Banks.
Okay, and we'll come back and try Mr. Simmons again. Mr. Banks?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can. Good evening.
Yes. Good evening, and thanks to the members of the board for this opportunity to make comment. I'm from Waverly Hills area, and as many of you know, we are in mourning because our just re-elected president, George Keating, passed away suddenly from a heart attack. But he was very much an advocate on stormwater and being the public face of Waverly Hills and bringing to your attention the flooding, especially along 18th Street. But I just want to mention that as an introduction, and several of you have made comments in various forums concerning George, which is very much appreciated by the Waverly Hills community. I want to applaud the efforts of the county manager and staff on how the one-year CIP was developed within the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic. I generally agree with the priorities as set forth by the county manager, especially for stormwater management. While I have appeared before you in the past as an advocate for parkland acquisition under the circumstances, I fully understand that this is not a priority at this time. However, notwithstanding the difficult circumstances that you are considering this CIP, I bring to your attention the $4.8 million the county manager has proposed for land acquisition for stormwater mitigation. As the recent Civic Federation resolution mentioned, in the past, parkland acquisition was for dual purposes, open space and flood mitigation. With this CIP, there may be a small opportunity to again do land acquisition for dual purpose, open space and flood mitigation. But concerning land acquisition in general, notwithstanding COVID-19, the county board will need to address land acquisitions not only for parks, but also schools and future fire station and other things, other items for the additional 50,000 people that are expected by 2040. What I would suggest is that just as the manager also has a section of the CIP describing our debt service limitations, and in the operating budget, there's the need for county reserves, the CIP should also include a short analysis of possible land acquisition strategies that will need to support future population increases. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Banks.
Okay, we will try, I believe Rod Simmons has joined us. Mr. Simmons?
Maybe encourage him to unmute.
Yeah, Mr. Simmons, can you unmute? We see you, I think.
*6.
Or the microphone button. Okay, we'll try to help him out.
Okay, welcome back.
We can move on.
Our next speaker?
I'm sorry, our next speaker is Kathleen Mcsweeney.
And I get 3 minutes, right?
Yes, you do. You do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the County Board, Mr. Manager, and county staff. I'm Kathleen Mcsweeney, and I'm representing the Joint Facilities Advisory Commission. Our commission was created as an advisory body jointly appointed by the Arlington County Board and the Arlington School Board. The commission has been charged with reviewing the county CIP prior to its adoption and making recommendations to the county board on the adoption of the CIP. We support the general approach taken by the county manager and the principles used to include projects in the current abbreviated CIP, knowing that next year we'll have an opportunity to try it again. As the commission considered facilities in the county, the comments have focused on items detailing infrastructure investments, such as those for community facilities, maintenance, and stormwater. There is a common thread you will note throughout all the recommendations. We recommend that the county make a concerted effort to co-locate public facilities on county-owned land. In terms of stormwater, notwithstanding the very good comments being raised about equity, we do believe that stormwater has impacted neighborhoods across the county. It is a public safety issue, and the county must comply with regulatory requirements. So we do endorse moving forward with this element of the CIP. In terms of land acquisition, we recommend that the county develop an integrated land acquisition strategy that seeks to account for parks and recreation needs, stormwater needs, and facility needs in a holistic manner, and plan to include green infrastructure and biophilic principles. The county could start with the concept of explicitly linking parkland acquisition and overland flow land acquisition together, along with more funding for both. In terms of multi-use facilities, the CIP discusses the need to address end-of-life issues for the wastewater treatment under the Solids Master Plan. The Commission encourages the county to consider ways to recapture space at this site for other potential uses. There are interesting examples of multi-use waste treatment facilities. A notable site is Riverbank State Park in New York City. In terms of the Shirlington Road site, the CIP includes $3.4 million for art facilities near Shirlington and in the Green Valley Civic Association. The 4-mile run area.
What's on our mind.
I'm so sorry. Somebody, could you please mute your phone?
Thank you.
Okay.
We note that we have not seen specific plans for this site. The 4-mile run area plan indicates this area is appropriate for reuse, redevelopment of industrial, service, commercial, or public uses. This is another public facility that presents an excellent co-location opportunity, and planning for such co-located facilities with community input is recommended for this site. We have submitted a letter that has many more observations from commission members. Because we weren't able to meet, commissioners did individually listen to your June 16th meeting and submitted comments. And I represent those comments here tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the work you're doing with JFAC and for JFAC's work. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Kelvin Manners, followed by Nicole Merlin, and we're still going to try to get back to Mr. Simmons.
Yeah. Mr.
Hello,
Manners?
can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'm having a few technical difficulties on my end over here. But first, I want to thank you all for having me and for allowing me to speak in today's forum. One of the issues that I'd like to address today is the body cameras that we have already began to appropriate funding for. And I want to make sure that is being voiced the importance of the alternative measures that goes into the statement of defunding the police. Now, that's not a blanket statement that says take the money away from police. What it is talking about is alternative policing and community efforts to support communities on a more healthy basis. I do want to bring voice to the point that even given with body cameras, and there has been funding now that's going to be allocated towards it, we want to make sure that these funds aren't just ballooned funds into the budget of the police department or other agencies. But we want to make sure that the funds are being used to satisfy the conditions that exist within the communities on a preventative measure, as well as bringing together that we want to see from individuals who happen to encounter the police at any given time. Different arenas that are being allocated, there's different allocations of funding for the body cams and for the efforts as far as going forward. The Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, the police department, the jail, and things of this nature. What we want to be able to see is that individuals' rights are respected. And that's not always visible on a body cam, but that's something too that we can work through alternative measures to make sure that these things happen or come about. So this is one of the issues that I'd like to bring forth before the board today. I also like to bring forth what the numbers and the status or the statistics are representing, the data, and how the data is being represented as far as what the arrests are, as far as what the results are, or what the end results are of the situations of individuals who simply encounter the police. This is one of the items that I have been writing on, and I'll be presenting this to the county board in a written format coming up here shortly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manners.
Okay, we will go to Nicole Merlin, and then we will try Rod Simmons.
Okay. Ms. Merlin.
Hey there. Oh, God. I'm going to turn that off. Okay. So thank you guys for having me. I am hoping not to talk too long. I don't usually come to CIPs. I really appreciate, obviously, all infrastructure that you all are doing. I wanted to also say thank you about continuing to fund the Roslyn Highland Park. That's one of the very few places in that area that has open space for kids to play in. So thank you for that. Also, thank you for considering body cameras and considering the NAACP's proposal there. I wanted to talk about two items relating to stormwater funding. I think some people have talked about the equity between North and South Arlington in the funding. One of the things that stood out to me throughout the past several years between 2012, 2015. This year, I think another time, there's been sewage leaks in 4 Mile Run. And that's not necessarily stormwater, but you do have bond items on here to work on the Lebaron stream, which is along 4 Mile Run. So it might be something to consider to add improvements to. There seems to just be a lot of problems with dumping and mistakes happening along 4 Mile Run, which is a huge problem. The other thing that I just was skimming through and saw and just had a question on, and I know you aren't taking questions, but there is a lot of jargon about a $2 million funding for water quality credits, for MS4 permits and nutrient credits for Washington Golf and Country Club. And so I don't really know what that means. I've been trying to Google it for the past couple of days. It seems like you guys are paying down for them to like not be, go over the amount of nutrients that they leak into the streams. I have no idea, but it's not really addressed in the bond, and it's only mentioned one time, and it's significant. It's 2 times more than the body worn cameras. So it's a fairly significant item. And so a little bit more information on that, or at least less jargony, would be helpful. So I know I'm not talking to the air. Anyway, thank you for your time, and I'm supportive of all of your bond measures.
Oh, thank you very much. We're not answering questions right now, but we're all happy to take them. Thank you.
Okay, we will try to go back to Mr. Simmons.
Okay.
Hello, I just dialed in.
Hi, Mr. Simmons, we hear you.
Thank you. Thanks for hanging with me here. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rod Simmons, North Arlington resident, and for nearly 3 decades, a environmental scientist and ecological restoration practitioner, and longtime county consultant on and off as well. There's some good things in this CIP proposal that, with respect to stormwater management, the land acquisition, and the LID, the low impact development of the bioswales, the groundwater infiltration structures is what the LIDs are. Those are good, and they've been successful. I would urge the county, though, to reconsider and revisit the stormwater infrastructure plans for stream construction projects. Sometimes they're called stream restoration, but they're not restoration. They're just pure construction projects. They're highly destructive, and they're misapplied where they're located in the county and in the region. And something I've been working on quite a bit. I've worked with the county on that as well, and I'll continue to offer my services and assistance in that way. But the recent removal of 1,000 trees, mature remnant native canopy trees, is really just one of many negative effects of these projects. There's lots of issues with them. We don't have time tonight to get into them, but I would urge the board to revisit this whole issue of the natural channel design stream construction projects in the county. We really can't afford to have them destroy the last and best of our forested parks like Gulf Branch and Donaldson Run and other places. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Simmons. I'm glad you got through.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care, Ryan. Thanks.
Okay, we will go on to Mary Glass, followed by Taylor Wright.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and do you have my slides?
I do. Just give me 1 second, Miss Glass.
We see them.
Great, thank you. As stated earlier, the county plans to ask for over $50 million in new bond funds for stormwater programs. In order to do that, we need to make sure that these are cost effectively used and that they're closely monitored to meet what are the real community needs. A good example in the 2021 proposal is the $2.5 million that is devoted to extending the Donaldson Run stream restoration. And I think this is an indefensible investment in the context of what we're doing with the budget. As you can see on this slide, the promise of man-made natural channels, as shown on the county website, is lush vegetation and stable streams. The reality is the other pictures: downed trees, wide mud flats, failing built structures, and stagnant pools. We need to stop and rethink this use of funds. Next slide, please.
Yes, we see it.
Okay. As shown in the previous slide, natural channel design is really ill-suited, as Rod said, to the terrain. Citizens locally are very concerned at the rapid deterioration and the amount of repair and maintenance dollars that will be required. In addition to the benefits that were promised that haven't been realized, wildlife habitat pollution reduction, we got irreplaceable damage to the existing ecological communities, not just one resource like trees. We've been told that the only way to meet the Chesapeake Bay regulations is to do these stream restorations, and that's wrong. There are other approaches that are available. But most important of all, there are proven innovative techniques that can stabilize streams and preserve the natural environment. And there are budget considerations that are very important. These stream restorations are too expensive, $2.5 million for one short stream segment, and there are other similar projects such as Gulf Branch, which are on the boards. Construction contracts have not been completed on this, and easements on private land are now in question. There is available engineering data that can be used for less expensive design alternatives and repairs to streams, outfalls, and bridges, and some of the alternatives with sustainable payoffs like stormwater prevention. We have the next slide. Just one proven alternative is stream restoration using wood structures. As you can see in the top picture, before the stream was incised 5 to 8 feet deep. In the bottom picture with the wood structures, the same trees, the same meander, the little land disturbance, and the successful restoration was succeeded at a reduced cost of 75 to 90% per linear foot, instead of $1,900, much, much less. With our current budget squeeze, we can do better as we move forward by making changes to this stormwater program.
Thank you, Ms. Glass. Perfectly timed. Thank you for the slides.
Our next speaker is Taylor Reich, followed by Mark Blacknell. Okay. We will go on to Mark Blacknell.
Okay.
Hi, this is Mark. I'm sorry that my video isn't working right now. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. I just want to take this opportunity to ask the county board to yet again pay attention to what it is that the public is asking for, because I'm not sure, in fact, I'm fairly sure that staff does not always present the full picture of what's going on. It's been really frustrating to look at sort of the CIP and hear that, right, we're prioritizing the stormwater system, which, yes, it's something we need, but why did we do that over any of the millions of other needs that we have? I have been involved in Arlington Civic Affairs for 10 years in a fairly significant way, and it has become more and more frustrating to see staff fail to inform the county board about what the priorities are, what the trade-offs are, in a really honest way. And I would just ask that you guys take a really hard look at why there are constantly people in the public who are upset about what the county is proposing, and staff is telling you it's not a problem. I would like you guys to take a really hard look at the gap in there. Again, I'm somebody who's been involved for a long time. I know that there's lots of cranks out there. I'm apparently turning into one. But it is so incredibly frustrating to see over and over the county board take the word of people, Mark Schwartz and other folks who are not serving you well, and saying that these are your only choices ahead, and when in fact they are not. So again, This is the voice of a very frustrated, longtime, very involved Arlington citizen who would like you to do a much better job of pushing staff to do a better job of serving your interests and the Arlington County citizens' interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Blacknell. So we try Mr. Reich again.
Yes, Mr. Reich?
Yes. Thank you so much for your patience. Hello, members of the county board, other citizens. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm born and raised citizen of Arlington County, currently living here as well. I would like to encourage the county board on a couple of specific points on the capital improvement plan. First, regarding stormwater management, I think that we should make active plans as we're allocating funds to stormwater management to make sure that we're planning for sort of resilient densification along with stormwater management to make sure that we're not just and that those plans include daylighting of streams. We shouldn't just widen pipes underground. We should look for ways to bring our undergrounded streams back up to the surface, increase their carrying capacity in case of storms, and provide pleasant outdoor spaces in the denser, more sustainable, and more resilient neighborhoods with less surface parking that we're building, especially on secondary corridors like Lee Highway. Regarding police, body cameras, car cameras, I think these are very good things. I don't think that we should be spending more money on them. I think that we should be requiring the police to fund these out of their existing budgets. And I know that the capital improvement plan is not the place for this, but I also think that we should be substantially cutting those budgets. I'm talking cut down to 20% of what it is right now. I know that the capital improvement plan also funds a lot of transportation. I want to encourage the board to do all that they can to make sure that the transportation funding goes only to sustainable projects, no new roads, no renovations of existing roads that do not turn lanes over whenever possible from cars to buses and bicycles. Yeah, I'm proud to call this county my home, and I hope that the county board will advance the capital improvement plan with changes that make it more just, more sustainable, and better for all who would be Arlingtonians, even those who can't afford to live here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reich. All right. Madam Clerk, is that all we've had signed up and registered so far?
Yes, Madam Chair, those are all of our speakers so far. We will continue to monitor until 8 p.m.
Okay, that's fine. So colleagues, and everybody else, we will wait until 8 to see if anyone comes and wants to speak to us in that time. All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, let us know if anybody arrives.
Will do.
All right, Madam Clerk, have we had anyone else register?
Madam Chair, we're doing one final check of the list.
Thank you.
30 seconds, checking in with the Deputy Clerk.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, we do not have any additional speakers for tonight's public hearing.
All right, thank you very much. All right, colleagues, I need to then make a motion, and I want to thank everybody for coming, by the way, who was here. I found tonight's remarks really helpful, actually. Very helpful, kind of knowing what people are thinking and concerned about. So I would like to move to close the public hearing on the proposed capital improvement program and to carry over action on these items to the July 18, 2020 County Board meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Mr. DeFranti.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Mr. Dorsey.
Aye.
Ms. Garvey. Aye. All right, thank you all very much. That brings to an end our public hearing on the capital improvement program. And so for anybody listening or concerned, if you still have information you'd like us to have, we are still only an email away, or a phone call or a text, or an open door Monday. So there are a lot of ways still to get in touch with us, but this is our last public hearing. We will be having a work session on July 9, which will be open for people to attend. I think that's going to be virtually. And then we will take action on our CIP again, as I said, on our July 18 meeting, which we're hoping and planning to hold in person with a lot of precautions. So anything else to come before the board tonight? I think not. All right. Everybody, we are, thank you. All right, everybody, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Stay well.